With you guys today, Dijonai Carrington. After clotheslining Sophie Cunningham, running into the locker room, screaming, "That's white privilege!" Then tweeting 8/23, threatening Sophie Cunningham and the Indiana Fever, Dijonai Carrington now comes out and clarifies what she means when she says white privilege for the Indiana.
2 minutes left in the first quarter. Dijonai Carrington just slapped the dog shit out of Sophie Cunningham. Sophie pops up. She's obviously upset. Dijonai says, "Try me." And then look at Stephanie White. Look at her face. Look. She's mad as shit. Now, number one, this is obviously a flagrant 2. It just is. By the letter of the law, you got to call a flagrant 2. We all know.
That girl needs to be thrown out the league. She's not even a good enough player to be bringing this type of drama. She needs to be thrown.
Welcome back to WNBA Core. Today, we are breaking down one of the most explosive controversies of the entire season. Dijonai Carrington is right in the center of a massive public storm following a brutal clothesline foul on Sophie Cunningham, followed by her running to the locker room and posting about white privilege, before tweeting threatening statements directed at Cunningham and the Indiana Fever. Now, Carrington has come forward to clarify what she actually meant by her comments. Let's break down the full sequence of events, step by step. With around 2 minutes left in the opening quarter, Dijonai Carrington delivered a violent strike right to the head and neck area of Sophie Cunningham. Sophie immediately popped back up off the hardwood, visibly furious about the contact. Carrington responded on the court with a defiant, "Try me." Meanwhile, if you look at Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White, her expression said everything. She was absolutely livid on the sideline. First and foremost, by every literal definition in the rulebook, this was a clear flagrant 2. When contact is this excessive and dangerous, officials have no choice. Many fans and analysts are arguing that Carrington's actions crossed line after line, with critics even calling for severe league discipline or suspensions, pointing out that no amount of on-court drama should justify that level of physical danger. Welcome back to WNBA Core. Today I have another breakdown for you guys, and I hope you're ready for this story. Stay with me all the way through to the end as we break down every single detail of what took place. Before we jump into the deep end, if you appreciate this coverage, please hit the like button and subscribe to WNBA Core. Believe it or not, over 90% of the people watching our videos right now haven't hit that subscribe button yet. It is 100% free, takes just 1 second, and means the world to our team. Have you subscribed already? Awesome, thank you so much for the support. Now, let's get right back into the story. Dijonai Carrington apparently felt the sports world needed a lecture after her ejection. Emerging from the locker room, she posted a 2-word statement without offering a single word of apology or initial context: white privilege. In the days following, she has continued to defend the post, alter her narrative, issue clarifications, and engage in heated debates with virtually anyone who challenged her perspective. Honestly, it has devolved into one of the most chaotic social media sagas we have witnessed from a WNBA player all year.
Cunningham, otherwise known as MAGA Barbie in the WNBA, is a superstar player. She's one of the most famous female athletes in the world because she stood up for women in women's sports, saying only biological women should be allowed to play in the WNBA. And for that, she is literally risking her life. Check this out. This is what happened to Sophie Cunningham last night when she was clotheslined by a filthy, dirty player for Chicago who has a name that I can't pronounce, or maybe I just refuse to do that. That's my right as an American. But this is a player that has attacked Caitlin Clark, gouged her eye out, that has now bloodied the face of Sophie Cunningham, and as soon as she did this, she tweeted white privilege, meaning she's declaring this is a race crime. Now, if a white woman was doing this to black women, it'd be the #1 story in the world. She'd be banned from the league forever. But somehow black women are allowed to get away with this against white women. And it's white women in the league who make themselves a target by simply standing up for traditional values. And
Cunningham has spent the entire season as one of Caitlin Clark's most vocal defenders. She has repeatedly stated on the record that neither the WNBA leadership nor game officials do enough to protect Clark from the intense physical punishment she receives every single night. Cunningham went so far as to claim that opposing teams actively discuss trying to rough up Clark in their locker rooms to welcome her to the league. Speaking out so openly obviously hasn't made Cunningham popular among rival players, and she has made it clear that she is fully aware of the hostility directed her way.
That's assault, brother. You can't do that. What the fuck? Is this just the default if you can't think? Or if you just like don't want to take accountability for your actions? Oh my god, this league, bro. White privilege while you're wearing a bleach blonde dyed wig. I mean, the fuck? What is privileged about that? You stone cold Steve Austin clotheslined her ass. What about that is white privilege? The WNBA stays undefeated. It truly does. They can't get out of their own.
This incident also brought back comments made earlier in the season by legendary college basketball broadcaster Dick Vitale. When Caitlin Clark was ranked only as the 9th best guard in a player-voted league poll, Vitale publicly called the vote pure jealousy, predicting that players would eventually realize how much financial prosperity Clark was bringing to everyone in the league. Following the Carrington hit, Vitale's perspective took on a whole new weight. Here was another instance of a player closely aligned with Clark receiving heavy physical punishment, while former players celebrated the hit online and coaches offered soft defenses of the aggressor instead of condemning the violence. Seeing this pattern repeat makes it hard not to wonder if Vitale was spot on. Make no mistake about the breakdown of the play itself, Carrington targeted Cunningham. Analysts argue she targeted her due to her political opinions and the widespread praise and media attention she receives. It was a dirty hit that had nothing to do with stopping a basket. Then, after being ejected, Carrington retreated to the locker room to play the victim card, as if the camera crews didn't capture the entire hit in high definition. That isn't intense competition, that is an athlete striking someone they dislike and then invoking societal issues the moment they are held accountable by referees. When you look closely at what took place on the court, the sequence is completely straightforward. Sophie Cunningham was sprinting down the floor on a fast break, completely open for what should have been a routine layup. Instead of making a legitimate attempt to contest or block the ball, Carrington pursued her from behind and struck Cunningham across the head and neck area with her forearm. Cunningham slammed hard onto the floor. Even though the basket went in, nobody was focused on the score. Play was stopped immediately as referees went to the replay monitor. After reviewing the footage, officials upgraded the call to a flagrant 2, which carries an automatic ejection under WNBA rules. There is zero room for debate on the rule: wind up, heavy impact, follow through, high potential for injury, and striking a vulnerable player in the air. Every single box on the flagrant 2 checklist was checked. Cunningham landed awkwardly on her leg and could have suffered a catastrophic injury. When Carrington was being escorted off, she turned around yelling, "Try me, try me." Critics quickly pointed out how absurd that looked considering she had just leveled Cunningham from behind. It left fans wondering how a key player could completely abandon the game state just to deliver a revenge hit, acting like someone sent her on a specific hit mission rather than playing winning basketball. Cunningham sprang up from the floor in an absolute rage, immediately stepping toward Carrington before players and officials rushed in to separate them. Notably, the head of the officiating crew clarified after the game that Cunningham was not assessed a technical foul because her heated reaction was considered completely justified given the severity of the hit she had just absorbed. When the referees themselves state that a player's rage is understandable, it proves just how severe the hit was. Photographs of the incident quickly went viral, showing the exact moment of impact alongside screenshots of Carrington's white privilege post. The officiating call was objective: whether a player is black, white, Asian, or Hispanic, hitting a shooter across the neck and head area is an automatic flagrant 2 ejection. The fact that this turned into a social media controversy highlights how far the league still has to go in terms of professional standards. Where does race enter a referee's call if the officials themselves confirm the contact was dangerously excessive and that Cunningham's anger was 100% warranted? The rules apply equally to every athlete on the floor. But the real story wasn't just the ejection itself, it was the fact that Carrington posted white privilege as if Cunningham's race was the sole reason the referees threw Carrington out of the game. Commentators began assembling highlight reels showing Carrington's history of physical play across the league, pointing out past instances where she used long fingernails near Caitlin Clark's eyes, chased players down from behind, or engaged in hair pulling during loose ball scrambles. While physical play has always been part of basketball history, turning on-court fouls into a racial culture war while ignoring the actual rulebook is where the narrative completely broke down. Carrington didn't just post the phrase, she tagged the Indiana Fever account directly beneath it on Threads. There was no context, no explanation, just two words open to immediate public interpretation. Naturally, the entire sports landscape interpreted the post the exact same way, a player getting ejected for hitting an opponent and immediately blaming racial privilege for the referee's decision. Former athlete and prominent media personality Emmanuel Aiko addressed the situation directly, holding nothing back. Aiko systematically explained why the referee's decision was purely about rule enforcement and player safety. He detailed how Carrington struck Cunningham in the head, drew blood, and made zero contact with the ball. Aiko pointed out that players of all racial backgrounds have both committed hard fouls and been on the receiving end of them, proving that race played no role in the referee's whistle. He went on to call Carrington's post ignorant and asinine, capturing the frustration of millions of basketball fans watching the coverage unfold. Aiko's critique was particularly damaging because he exposed how Carrington reacted impulsively in the heat of the moment, only to try and backtrack once the public backlash hit a boiling point. He noted that hard fouls happen every night in basketball, but players don't label them along racial lines unless someone intentionally tries to ignite a culture war. Instead of accepting the critique, Carrington clapped back at Aiko, making the situation even more convoluted. She claimed, "I never once stated that the referee's foul call was white privilege. You assumed that. Try using your critical thinking skills." She went on to cite her education at Stanford University, claiming she understands the historical weight of the term and would never use it loosely without justification. In essence, Carrington tried to argue that nobody should have connected her post about white privilege, which tagged the opponent's team seconds after she was ejected for hitting a player, to the actual hit itself. But the logic falls completely flat. If the post wasn't about the foul and the ejection, what else could it possibly have been about? She tagged the team of the player she had just struck while walking into the locker room. The timing told the entire story, and no amount of lecturing about higher education or critical thinking could change what the public saw with their own eyes. Aiko delivered a swift and sarcastic rebuttal to her defense. He essentially told her that if she claims the post wasn't connected to the hit, he would stand corrected, but reminded her that society operates on speaker-oriented communication. It is the responsibility of the person making public statements to be clear, direct, and explicit, rather than dropping volatile, inflammatory phrases onto public platforms and then getting mad when millions of people interpret them logically. You cannot post a heavy phrase like white privilege, tag an opponent's team right after a flagrant 2 ejection, and then act superior when the sports world connects the dots. The situation became even more bizarre when other figures around the league began chiming in. Sydney Colson, a former teammate of Cunningham who previously played on the Fever, publicly posted reactions laughing at and celebrating the hit. Seeing a former teammate openly applaud a foul that drew blood and endangered a player shows just how deeply polarized the environment around Sophie Cunningham and the Indiana Fever has become. The hostility isn't just coming from rival fan bases, it is coming from within the player community itself. Even Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White offered a surprisingly muted response when questioned by reporters. Instead of passionately defending her own player who had just been struck in the head, White remarked that she didn't believe Carrington intentionally targeted Cunningham's neck, adding that she didn't mind hard fouls because Carrington is simply an intense competitor who doesn't give up easy layups. Hearing a head coach downplay a hit that left her own player bleeding on the floor left many analysts stunned. Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham are currently driving unprecedented financial growth, TV ratings, and arena sellouts for the WNBA. Networks are reshaping broadcast slates specifically to air their games, and arenas that were once half-empty are selling out across the country. Yet, throughout this season, we have seen repeated instances where players, former teammates, and even coaches seem more interested in resisting this momentum than protecting the very athletes driving it, whether through dangerous fouls, passive defense of aggressors, or public celebration when hits occur. Sophie Cunningham has faced immense criticism online, being targeted by opposing fans and labeled with extreme political commentary. It is not an exaggeration to say that significant portions of the league's vocal ecosystem appear openly hostile toward her. Yet, after grabbing Cunningham around the neck and earning a clear ejection, Carrington ran to social media to frame her punishment around white privilege in a league where the vast majority of players represent minority and LGBTQ+ demographics. Critics slammed Carrington for playing the victim in a situation where she was clearly the aggressor on the court. When you step back and examine the big picture, the entire dynamic is surreal. The very players who display the most resentment toward Clark and Cunningham are often the ones benefiting the most financially from the economic boom those two stars have created, including higher charter flight budgets, increased salaries, and massive media rights deals. Yet, parts of the league continue to react with bitterness rather than appreciation. Stephanie White's soft defense of Carrington, Sydney Colson's public celebration of the hit, Carrington's dangerous foul, her initial locker room post, and her extended argument with Emmanuel Aiko all point to a much deeper issue. Carrington can talk all she wants about elite universities and critical thinking, but the timing of her original post spoke far louder than any post-incident explanation ever could. Damage control rarely erases what the public witnessed live. You cannot have a player commit an undeniable flagrant 2 foul, tweet, white privilege, seconds after stepping off the floor, and then complain when the media discusses the incident in racial terms. Carrington initiated that entire conversation herself. The foul was a pure basketball infraction. The moment she introduced white privilege into the equation, she dragged the sport into a social media war. The WNBA now finds itself caught in an awkward position, celebrating the highest viewership, attendance, and revenue numbers in its history, while simultaneously trying to manage an internal culture where certain players seem ready to rebel against the very stars responsible for that growth. Carrington's ejection was handled correctly by the referees on the floor. But everything that followed, the tweet, the backtracking, the back and forth with analysts, and the applause from around the league, reveals far more about the current internal state of the WNBA than any single hard foul ever could.